Hello and welcome to the third installment of How to Learn Songs by Ear. I'm your host and instructor, CJ. Thanks for joining me. So far, we've been looking at a step-by-step process for learning songs by ear. Our first step was active listening. First, we want to listen to songs. And we've discovered that active listening is a little more challenging than we first would imagine. Usually we've been listening passively, now we've started to listen actively. We also learned about how to find our key signature. That's our next step. Step 2, key signature. Step 3, finding the root motion. And here we are on step 4, which really has two parts. The first part we did in our last lesson, which was looking at the harmonic structure, the chords underneath of the song. But today we're going to look at the chords that are played in the song, the ones that are performed. And how do we take the chords from being harmonic structure into the chords that we hear on the song, on the radio? How does that happen? Well, this happens when a song is given to performers, musicians, and producers. You know, a songwriter will write a song with certain chords in it, and then it's interpreted by musicians and producers, and that gives us a variety and wide array of sounds that we hear for a song. Keyboard sounds, even guitar sounds, bass sounds, all of these is provided by musicians. When it comes to interpreting the chords that are written in the harmonic structure, pianists typically use all of the stuff that we do in our exercises, scales, building triads, and we include inversions, chord inversions, chord extensions like ninths, 11ths, 13ths, and then we also use things like voicings and rootless voicings, which is basically another way of playing chords that's not as straightforward as our triads. Okay, first things first, let's pull away from our harmonic structure, because in our harmonic structure, when we look at Grace, Amazing Grace, our harmonic structure says that our first chord is the 1 chord, and in the key of C, that gives us a C triad, major triad. But that's not very musical at all. We're looking to be able to make music with this song. So when I, as a piano player, look at C, I don't see this triad. For me, that's not a C. That's C. All across the width of the piano. Right? C exists everywhere. And that's important when you're trying to figure out what it is that a pianist like me is playing. As you can see, just to get started, you need a good understanding of arpeggios. Why? Because we're going to be working with inversions. Inversions are extremely important. Now let's look at how to make an inversion first. Let's take a C triad. This is root position C, and now let's invert it by taking the bottom C and putting it on top. This is our first inversion. Then we can move this E up to the top. This gives us our second inversion. Why does this matter? Well, let's take a look at a song like Mary Had a Little Lamb. If you want to play Mary Had a Little Lamb, the first note in the melody is E. And the first chord is C. So if you play a straight C triad in root position and want to play the melody, it's very awkward. But if you invert the chord to second position, then you can play the chord and the melody. This is how inversions help us to play melodically as well as play chords. We can accompany ourselves on the piano. We can play melody and chords. It's much easier to play when you can use inversions. In terms of finding our chords, we looked at finding our chords from the bottom up, from the root. That still stands true. However, we want to be aware that sometimes the root is not in the bass. Sometimes it could be the 3rd degree of a chord that's in the bass, or even the 5th degree of a chord that's in a bass. For example, let's take a C major triad again. With our C major triad, we typically would have C in the root. But what if we have G in the root? This is the 5th of the chord, and it has a really nice function. It can be used as part of a 5 going to your 1 chord. Or how about the 3rd in the root? So whenever we use a note that's in the chord on the bottom that is not the root, we call it a slash chord. So quick recap on inversions. Inversions are great because they allow us to play the melody and to accompany ourselves with chords with one hand, with our right hand. Also, inversions allow us to play and expand across the entire keyboard instead of being in one fixed position on the keyboard. In the central register, we can go to the upper register and the lower register using inversions. When we talk about chord extensions, we're talking about adding to the chord. Now, let's start with adding something very simple to a chord. If we start with a triad, C triad, and just play C, it can be very, very boring. But let's say we add a 2, right? Now we got our C, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's add our 2, 2. Just by adding a 2, it changes our so just our C triad with an added 2 gives us a lot of flexibility. And how about if we add a 2, let's do a C chord to an F chord, and let's add 2 on the C and the F chord. Adds a lot. And towards the end there, I added in one more note. I added in a 4th, a suspended 4th. Now, our C triad, when we're in C, like I said, all of this is C. However, all of the notes, all of the diatonic notes of the C major scale are also available to me. So we've just added the 2. Now let's add the 4 and see what happens. 1, 2, 3, 4. To see what it sounds like. And that's just adding the 4 and resolving it. Right, because your 4 is going to add a little bit of tension, just like your 2. tension release, and tension release. 4, 3, 2, 3. This creates movement. We're still on a C triad. We haven't moved from C, but just by using the 2 and the 4, we've added tension. So when you're listening and trying to learn a song, listen out for these tricks. It's just using the 2, adding the 2 and the 4. Right? Now, you can also add the 6th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can add the 6th degree of the chord. This will give you a C6. And it also helps with movement because in conjunction with the 4 going from 4 to 3, when the 6 goes from 6 to 5, we get, we put them together. Let's move this to the left hand, just to 5 and 6, 5, 6, 5, 6, 5, 6, 5, 6. That's just 5 and 6, causing that movement right there. So that's something for you to listen out for, recognize that pattern when you hear it. So you know that that's the 6. And this is the 4. Suspended, resolved. And a 2, as in, imagine all the people. Alright, so in our triad, we've got our inversions that we've got. We can add a 2, we can add a 4 to get a sus, we can add a 6. We can get all of these combinations in there that you want to be able to identify when you're playing by ear. Now, we talk about this 6. But musicians, we also play in 6. Remember we did Mary Had a Little Lamb, Mary Had a Little Lamb. You can play it in 6ths. What's a 6? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Interval of a 6th. Alright? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Which is just a 3rd reversed. Take a 3rd, major 3rd, invert it, and you've got a 6th. Inversions, totally awesome. 3rd, inverted, you've got a 6th. Okay. And you see, when we're playing in 3rds, we can pass, see, we can stay in C, and we can use this. We can use that to add motion while still remaining on the C chord. Now, we've dealt with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now comes the 7th, major 7th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, major 7th. And in 7ths, this is where everything changes. Because with 7ths, you have our major 7th, and then we also have our dominant 7th when it comes to chords. Major 7th and a dominant 7th. The difference is that the dominant 7th is a 7th that has been flattened. It's been taken down a half step. Major 7th, take it down a half step, it becomes a dominant 7th. Now, what's really interesting about 7ths is what happens next. Because remember that we had a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2. But when we put a 7th in there, when we put a 7th, even a major 7th, then this note, this D doesn't become 2 anymore. It's 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So So now we have a C major ninth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. C major ninth. But if we flatten the 7th, then we have a C9. When we're naming chords, if we say C7th, that just means dominant 7th. That means flatted 7th. If it's a major 7th, then we will say major 7th. If it's not said major 7th, it's just 7th, then it's dominant 7th, because we don't say dominant 7th every time we want one. We just say 7th. It's important to understand 7th chords because our extensions are going to be built on top of them. Whether it's a major ninth, dominant ninth, flatted ninth. We have a dominant ninth, and then we also have an 11th. 9, 9, 10, 11. So with the 7th, 9th, and the 11th. Now it looks like it could be a slash chord. B flat could be B flat over C. But it's not. It's actually C, 7, 9, 11. Now 11ths can be used in a couple of different ways. Like for example, as a 5 chord going from 5 to 1. 5 to 1. We want to be able to have an 11th, G, 11th, G, 7, 9, 11. That's how you can use an 11th. But then we also have 13ths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yes, a while ago it was a 6, but now it's a 13 because the 7th is present, particularly our dominant 7th. 7, 9, 11, 13, and our root. But our 11th is, we don't want that. We want our 3rd. We put our 3rd, that gives us a nice voicing. Right? And this is what we would call a voicing. The difference between a inversion and a voicing is that voicings don't easily convert like this. Inversions, take the C, put it on top, yeah, put it on top. Voicings don't always work like that. Let's have this voicing, which is a C13. You want to be able to spread it out. Right? You can extend your voicing up top, go to an F, back to a C13. 3, 13, 7, 9. This is how you make, this is a common voicing. Going to an F, this is another common voicing with the 7th on the bottom. Our root is F, this is our dominant 7th, here's our major 3rd, which is A, and then our 13th, which is D. So this is how we add extensions on top and we make them into voicings. So if you're learning to play by ear, you want to learn some theory to be able to decipher and distinguish these common voicings. The ones that I've played, they are throughout music, they are standard voicings. There are a lot more voicings that are not standard. People come up with their own. There are gospel voicings, jazz voicings, things that are specific to particular genres like neo soul and all the rest of it. All of the above are used in comping, in playing solo, in playing with bands. They're just used in various different ways. So when it comes to learning songs by ear, you want to be able to hear these when you're listening for chords, right? You want to be able to hear not just the triads, but you want to hear those fillers. You want to hear when a 2 is added, and when a 4 is suspended, and when a 6th is added in, to a chord, as it says, being added in. So, and all of these are very pattern based. Again, we started by listening out for patterns, and that's what these really are. Once you start, first of all, becoming aware of them, that's my first thing, is to bring them to your awareness, and then have you be able to hear these in different contexts. And I'll put some of these contexts in the exercises that will follow, so you can hear these things in different contexts and hear what they sound like. Okay, so yes, we began with active listening, then we find our key signature, then we find our root motion. From our root motion, we get our diatonic chords, and we have to find sometimes non-diatonic chords, and all of these make up our foundation, our framework that we're going to put the song on. Now with these chords and inversions and voicings, this is how we color it up, this is how we dress it up. So we want to be able to get used to hearing these types of things, particularly your inversions and your arpeggios. Now, next comes your melodic lines. We're going to deal with melodic lines in the next lesson. Each step builds on the prior step. For example, your melodies are going to be built sometimes right out of these chords. They'll outline these chords and use scale motion. Again, this is why scales are so important. We know our scales and we know our triads. We're half the way there to learning just about any song. Okay, so I think that's going to wrap it up for this lesson. It's nice and short. So get on to the exercises below. I hope that you enjoyed them. Now, I would have loved to have gone into more detail about all of these extensions and harmonies and things, but really, all of that's entire course. Those things in and of themselves are an entire course. But the point of this is making sure that you know to find these chords and how to find these chords that piano players use specifically and typically. Okay, so yeah, that's it for this lesson. And thanks for hanging in there. You are a star. You are going to make it. I know you are. Get onto these exercises and let's move on. Great. Now see you in the next lesson. Thanks.